The biting dust of Nevada Territory's mining country seemed to stick to everything: clothes, hair, skin, but it clung with particular vengeance to Abigail Orwell's tears as she stumbled down the rutted path toward the Silver Peak mine. At 19 years old and weighing near 300 pounds, each step was an agony of effort in the scorching July heat of 1876. The other indentured workers, mostly men with weathered faces and hollow eyes, kept their distance, some casting sideways glances of pity, others of disdain. "Keep moving, girl," the foreman's voice cracked like a whip across her shoulders. "Your contract says you work till sundown, not till you catch your breath." Abigail's lungs burned as she hefted the heavy bucket of water up the incline. 2 weeks into her 3-year contract, and already she wondered if she would survive the month. The contract her stepfather had sold to the mining company in exchange for clearing his gambling debts promised her labor without complaint. She had no family left to rescue her, no money, and nowhere to go. "I'm coming, sir," she managed, her voice barely audible over the constant clanging of pickaxes against stone. Life hadn't always been this cruel. Before her mother's death 3 years ago, Abigail had known some happiness, despite the constant remarks about her size. She'd been educated, could read and write better than most. Her mother had insisted on it, promising that Abigail's worth went far beyond what others could see. But those memories provided little comfort as the Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on her sunburned neck. 20 miles away, Darian Matthews squinted against the same punishing sun as he guided his wagon toward Silver Peak. At 32, he'd spent nearly half his life working cattle, first for others and now for himself. His modest spread outside Carson City wasn't much compared to some, but it was his, paid for with 15 years of hard work and careful saving. "Easy there," he murmured to his team as they navigated a particularly rough stretch of road. The supplies in his wagon rattled sacks of flour, sugar, coffee, and other necessities for his ranch. Twice-yearly trips to the larger settlements were a necessity of frontier life. As his wagon crested the final rise before Silver Peak, Darian took in the sprawling, dusty mining town. Silver Peak had sprung up almost overnight when the Comstock lode was discovered, bringing with it saloons, brothels, and the particular brand of lawlessness that seemed to follow silver and gold wherever they were found. Darian didn't care for such places, preferring the open quiet of his ranch, but business occasionally required his presence. He guided his wagon toward the general store, nodding at familiar faces. Carson City wasn't so far that he was a complete stranger here. As he pulled to a stop, his attention was drawn to a commotion near the mining company office. "Get up, you worthless lump," a man's voice carried across the street, followed by the sound of a whip cracking. Darian turned to see a large young woman sprawled in the dust, a broken bucket at her feet, water seeping into the parched ground. Above her stood a foreman, leather whip in hand, face twisted with disgust. "That water was for the mules, not the dirt," the man snarled. "Pick yourself up and get another bucket, or it'll be another day added to your contract." Something in Darian's chest tightened as he watched the young woman struggle to her feet. Her dress, if the tattered, filthy garment could be called that, strained across her substantial frame. Her face, though smudged with dirt and streaked with tears, held a quiet dignity that struck him. Without quite knowing why, Darian found himself crossing the street. "That's enough," he said, his voice cutting through the midday heat. The foreman turned, annoyance flickering across his face. "This ain't your business, cowboy. Move along." "I've made it my business," Darian replied evenly. "Who holds this woman's contract?" The question seemed to surprise the foreman. "Silverton Mining Company. Why?" "I'd like to speak with whoever's in charge." The foreman laughed, a harsh sound like stones rattling in a tin can. "You looking to hire her? Trust me, she ain't worth the feed it would take to keep her." Darian ignored the comment, his eyes meeting the young woman's. Something in her gaze, a flicker of hope quickly extinguished, made his decision for him. "The manager's inside," the foreman finally said, jerking his thumb toward the company office. "But you're wasting your time." Abigail watched in confusion as the tall stranger disappeared into the office. No one had ever interfered on her behalf before. The foreman gave her a shove toward the well. "Get moving. You've still got work to do." Her hands trembled as she lowered the replacement bucket into the well. The other workers kept their distance, but their curious glances told her they were just as surprised by the cowboy's intervention. 20 minutes later, as she was lugging the heavy bucket back toward the mule pens, she saw the cowboy emerge from the office, followed by the company manager, Mr. Hargrove. "Orwell," Hargrove called out, "come here." Fear clutched at Abigail's chest as she set down the bucket and made her way toward the men. Had she somehow caused more trouble for herself? "This gentleman has purchased your contract," Hargrove said, his tone suggesting he was pleased to be rid of her. "You'll be going with him." Abigail stared, uncomprehending. Someone had bought her contract. What did that mean for her? In her limited experience, changing hands rarely improved one's circumstances. "Miss Orwell," the cowboy said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "My name is Darian Matthews. I have a ranch outside Carson City. I'm in need of someone to help with cooking and household matters. If you're willing, that's where we'll be headed." Abigail faltered, uncertain. Was this real or some cruel joke? "You don't have a choice, girl," Hargrove snapped. "Your contract's been legally transferred. You go where you're told." Darian's jaw tightened. "She has a name, Mr. Hargrove, and while the contract may be binding, I believe in giving people choices where I can." He turned back to Abigail. "Miss Orwell, I can promise you fair treatment, regular meals, and reasonable work. It's a quiet place, but honest." Abigail glanced back at the mine entrance, then at the broken bucket lying in the dust. Even if this stranger proved cruel in his own way, could it be worse than slowly dying in these mines? "I would be grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Matthews," she finally said, her voice small but steady. Darian nodded. "Good, gather your things and we'll be on our way." "She's got nothing to gather," the foreman interjected with a sneer. "What you see is what you get." Darian's expression darkened momentarily, but he simply nodded. "Then we'll stop at the general store before leaving town." An hour later, Abigail found herself perched on the wagon seat beside Darian, wearing a new calico dress and clutching a small bundle of supplies: soap, a hairbrush, and other basic necessities he had purchased without comment. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the mine, afraid that any word might shatter this unlikely turn of events. As the wagon rolled away from Silver Peak, Darian finally broke the silence. "I expect you have questions, Miss Orwell." Abigail stared at her hands folded in her lap. "Why did you buy my contract, Mr. Matthews?" Truly, Darian was silent for a moment, as if considering the question carefully. "I've seen animals treated better than you were being treated back there. It didn't sit right with me. But she hesitated, gesturing vaguely at herself. "A human being deserving of basic dignity," Darian finished firmly. "Your size doesn't change that fact." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd cried enough in the past 2 weeks to last a lifetime. "The work at my ranch won't be easy," Darian continued, "but it won't kill you either. I need someone to cook, keep house, and help with the garden. I've been managing alone since my housekeeper left to marry last spring, but I'm not much good at domestic matters." "I can cook," Abigail said quickly. "My mother taught me, and I can clean and garden too." Darian nodded. "Good, you'll have your own room in the house. It's small, but it's private. As for your contract, it runs 3 years, but I'll pay you a fair wage on top of room and board. When the contract ends, you'll have enough saved to make your own choices." Abigail stared at him in disbelief. "You'd pay me? The contract doesn't require that. The contract requires your labor in exchange for basic necessities. I believe honest work deserves honest pay." As the wagon continued its journey across the rugged terrain, Abigail found herself studying her new employer. Darian Matthews was tall and lean, with sun-browned skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His hands, gripping the reins with casual confidence, bore the calluses of someone who worked hard for a living. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something appealing about the quiet strength he exuded. "Have you always lived in Nevada territory, Mr. Matthews?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. "Born in Missouri," he replied. "Came west with my father after the war. He died of pneumonia our second winter here. I was 17. I'm sorry, Abigail said softly. My mother passed 3 years ago, fever. Darian nodded, understanding in his eyes. It's a hard country, takes as much as it gives. The journey to Darian's ranch took 2 days. They camped the first night by a small creek where Darian gave Abigail his bedroll while he slept under the wagon. He was unfailingly polite, but maintained a respectful distance that Abigail found both comforting and slightly disappointing, though she couldn't have explained why. When they finally arrived at the Matthews ranch, Abigail was struck by its modest beauty. The main house was small but solidly built of local timber, with a covered porch running its length. A barn, corral, and several outbuildings completed the homestead. Behind the house, a kitchen garden showed signs of neglect but obvious potential. It's not much, Darian said as he helped her down from the wagon, careful not to touch her more than necessary. But it's home. It's lovely, Abigail replied honestly. Inside, the house was simply furnished but clean. Darian showed her to a small bedroom off the kitchen. This was Mrs. Holloway's room, my former housekeeper. I hope it suits. Abigail stepped into the room, taking in the narrow bed, washstand, and small chest of drawers. After 2 weeks of sleeping on a dirt floor in a mining camp bunkhouse, surrounded by men who viewed her with either contempt or unsavory interest, this room seemed like a palace. It's perfect, Mr. Matthews. Thank you, Darian nodded. I'll let you get settled. There's a pump in the kitchen for water if you want to wash up. We can discuss your duties in the morning. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in weeks, Abigail allowed herself to hope that perhaps her life had taken a turn for the better. But experience had taught her that hope was often the prelude to disappointment. She would work hard, she decided, and expect nothing beyond what had been promised. The following weeks established a routine. Abigail rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, then spent her days cooking, cleaning, and gradually bringing the neglected kitchen garden back to life. Darian worked from sunup to sundown with his cattle and horses, occasionally joined by 2 hired hands who lived in the bunkhouse near the barn. To her surprise, Abigail found the work satisfying. Unlike the backbreaking labor at the mine, these tasks allowed her to use her mind as well as her hands, and for the first time in years, she had enough to eat simple, hearty food that Darian insisted she share equally. "You're not cooking just for me," he told her firmly when he caught her taking only scraps for herself. "You work hard, you eat what you need." As summer gave way to autumn, Abigail noticed small changes in herself. The constant walking between house, garden, and outbuildings had strengthened her legs. The endless lifting, carrying, and physical work had begun to reshape her body, not drastically, but noticeably to her own eyes. And the hollow, haunted look that had greeted her in the mirror upon her arrival was gradually being replaced by something calmer, more content. Darian noticed the changes too, though he said nothing. But Abigail sometimes caught him watching her as she hung laundry or gathered vegetables, a thoughtful expression on his face. He remained unfailingly polite, never overstepping the boundaries of their employer-employee relationship, but something was shifting between them, subtle as a change in the wind. One evening in late October, as Abigail was kneading dough for the next morning's bread, Darian came in from the barn earlier than usual. He washed at the pump outside, then entered the kitchen, his hair still damp. "Something smells good," he commented, taking his usual seat at the table. "Stew," Abigail replied, "and I'm making apple pie for dessert. Mr. Jacobson brought those Northern Spy apples when he delivered supplies yesterday." Darian watched her work the dough with strong, capable hands. "You've brought life back to this house, Abigail." It was the first time he'd used her given name. The sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. "I enjoy the work," she said simply, not trusting herself to say more. "It's more than the work," Darian insisted. "This was just a place to sleep before you came." "Now it feels like a home again." Abigail glanced up, surprised by the earnestness in his voice. "I'm glad," she said softly. Their gazes held for a long moment before Darian cleared his throat and looked away. "I need to ride into Carson City tomorrow. Would you like to come? You could visit the shops, perhaps choose some fabric for new dresses." I couldn't impose, it's not an imposition, Darian cut in. You've earned your wages. It's time you spent some of them as you see fit. The trip to Carson City marked a turning point. As they rode side by side in the wagon, conversation flowed more easily between them. Darian told stories of his early days in the territory, and Abigail shared memories of her childhood in St. Louis before her mother's remarriage had brought them west. My stepfather was not a kind man, she said quietly. After Mother died, he made it clear that my presence was an unwelcome burden. When he lost heavily at cards, selling my contract to the mining company solved two problems at once: his debt and his stepdaughter. Darian's hand tightened on the reins. No man with an ounce of decency would sell a young woman to the mines. He said no one else would ever want me, Abigail admitted, the words painful even now, because of my size. Darian was silent for a long moment. Some men see value only in what society tells them to value. Others learn to see with clearer eyes. In Carson City, Darian accompanied Abigail to several shops, standing patiently while she selected fabric, notions, and a few modest accessories. The shopkeepers, noting Darian's presence, treated Abigail with a deference she had rarely experienced. No one commented on her size or questioned her selections. As they were leaving the dressmaker's shop, a voice called out from across the street. Matthews, Darian Matthews. They turned to see a well-dressed man approaching, his expression friendly. Thought that was you, it's been ages. Thomas, Darian nodded. Good to see you, this is Miss Abigail Orwell, he hesitated briefly. Housekeeper. Something flickered in Abigail's chest at the pause, a small hurt she hadn't anticipated. Miss Orwell, Thomas greeted her politely before turning back to Darian. Say, a bunch of us are gathering at the Occidental tonight. Robert Winters is in town, you should join us. Darian glanced at Abigail. Another time, perhaps, we should head back before dark. Nonsense, Thomas insisted. The lady can stay at the hotel, my wife would be happy for her company, and you can ride back tomorrow. One night of civilization won't kill you. Before Darian could respond, Abigail spoke up. Please don't let me keep you from your friends, Mr. Matthews. I'm quite comfortable returning to the ranch alone with the wagon. Darian frowned. I wouldn't hear of it. It's a long journey. Really, I insist, Abigail said, forcing a smile. You've been working so hard. You deserve an evening of enjoyment. After some discussion, it was arranged that Abigail would return to the ranch with one of Darian's ranch hands who happened to be in town, while Darian would ride back the following day. As they parted ways, Abigail couldn't help feeling she had somehow failed a test she hadn't known she was taking. The journey back to the ranch was silent and uncomfortable. Jim Renfrew, the hand who accompanied her, was polite but distant, and Abigail was left alone with her thoughts. Why had it bothered her so much to be introduced as Darian's housekeeper? It was the truth, after all. What had she expected? Darian returned late the next afternoon, bringing a small package wrapped in brown paper. For you, he said, handing it to Abigail as she met him at the door. A thank you for understanding about yesterday. Inside was a book, a collection of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Abigail ran her fingers over the embossed leather cover. I remembered you mentioning you enjoyed poetry, Darian explained, suddenly looking uncertain. The bookseller recommended this. It's beautiful, Abigail whispered, deeply touched. Thank you. That night, after Darian had retired to his room, Abigail sat by the kitchen fire reading her new book. Her fingers paused on one particular sonnet. How do I love thee, let me count the ways. The words stirred something in her, a longing she had long suppressed. Winter came early that year, bringing heavy snows that isolated the ranch for days at a time. The close quarters fostered a new intimacy between Abigail and Darian. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Abigail with her sewing or reading, Darian whittling or going over his ledgers. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they simply enjoyed the comfortable silence. On Christmas Eve, Abigail surprised Darian with a special dinner and a gift, a hand-knitted scarf she had worked on in secret. I didn't expect anything, Darian said, running his fingers over the fine wool. It's not much, Abigail replied, but I wanted to thank you for all you've done. Darian reached into his pocket and produced a small box. I have something for you as well." Inside was a delicate silver locket. "It was my mother's," Darian explained. "I thought I hoped you might like it." Abigail stared at the beautiful piece, speechless. "I couldn't possibly accept something so precious." "You could," Darian said quietly, "if you understood what you've come to mean to me." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Abigail raised her eyes to his, searching for meaning. "I'm not sure I understand," she said carefully. Darian moved closer, taking her hand in his. "When I first saw you at that mine, I acted on instinct. I couldn't bear to see anyone treated that way, but bringing you here, getting to know you." He paused, seemingly searching for words. "Abigail, you're the most remarkable person I've ever known. Your strength, your kindness, your intelligence, you've become essential to me, not as a housekeeper, but as a woman." Abigail felt her heart thundering in her chest. "Darian, I haven't changed that much. I'm still not what most would consider desirable." "Most are fools," Darian said firmly. "I see you, Abigail, all of you, and I admire everything I see." When he leaned forward to kiss her, Abigail allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, miracles did happen. Their courtship progressed slowly through the winter months. Darian was respectful of Abigail's position and the fact that she was still technically bound by her contract. But as spring approached, bringing new life to the land, he began to speak of the future. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they walked along the creek that ran behind the property, "about your contract." Abigail tensed slightly. They had carefully avoided the subject of her indenture in recent months. "What about it?" she asked. "I want to tear it up," Darian said simply. "It doesn't feel right, being in love with someone who's legally bound to me." Love. He had never used the word before, though his actions had spoken clearly enough. Hearing it now made Abigail's heart soar. "But if you tear it up, what would I be?" she asked. "No longer your housekeeper, no longer obligated to stay." Darian took her hands in his. "You would be whatever you choose to be, free to go, free to stay, free to consider a different sort of contract altogether." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "One that would make us equals in the eyes of the law." Abigail stared at the ring, then at the man holding it. "Are you asking me to marry you, Darian Matthews?" "I am," he replied, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I love you, Abigail Orwell. I want to build a life with you not as master and servant, but as husband and wife." Tears spilled down Abigail's cheeks. "People will talk, they'll say you could have done better." "Let them talk," Darian said fiercely. "I know the truth. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me." They were married in Carson City on a bright May morning in 1877. The ceremony was small but joyful, attended by a few friends who had come to know and respect Abigail during her time at the ranch. Darian's friend, Thomas, served as best man, his wife as matron of honor. As they exchanged vows, Abigail wore a dress of deep blue silk that complemented her eyes. She had made it herself, taking pride in creating something beautiful that fit her still substantial but now stronger body. The months of active work had continued to reshape her figure, but more importantly, they had reshaped her sense of self. She stood tall beside Darian, no longer the broken young woman he had rescued from the mines. Life as Mrs. Matthews brought new challenges and joys. Abigail continued to manage the household, but now she also learned about the business side of the ranch, revealing a sharp mind for figures that Darian quickly came to rely upon. Together, they expanded operations, adding more cattle and horses to their growing herd. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Sometimes they would read aloud to each other poetry, novels, newspaper articles from back east. Other times they simply talked, planning their future together. "I was thinking," Darian said one such evening, a year into their marriage, "that back bedroom might make a nice nursery someday." Abigail felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "Do you really want children with me?" Darian took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I want everything with you, Abigail. Everything life has to offer." 9 months later, their son Daniel was born, a healthy, robust boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. As Abigail held him for the first time, she marveled at how drastically her life had changed in just a few short years. "He's perfect," Darian whispered, sitting beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders. He is, Abigail agreed, tears of joy streaming down her face. Our miracle. As Daniel grew, the ranch prospered. Darian and Abigail added onto the house, built a larger barn, and hired more hands to manage their expanding operation. Abigail's garden became famous throughout the county, providing vegetables and flowers in abundance. She began to host gatherings for neighboring ranchers and their wives, discovering a talent for bringing people together that she hadn't known she possessed. 2 years after Daniel's birth, their daughter Eliza joined the family, followed 18 months later by another son, Joseph. Their home rang with children's laughter and the everyday sounds of a loving family. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching 7-year-old Daniel teach 4-year-old Eliza how to rope a fence post, Darian turned to his wife. "Do you ever think about where we started?" he asked quietly. "That day at the mine," Abigail leaned against his shoulder. "Sometimes it seems like another lifetime. I thank God every day that I happened to be in Silver Peak that morning," Darian said, his voice thick with emotion, "that I saw you when I did." "As do I," Abigail replied. "Though I've often wondered what made you stop, what made you notice me when no one else ever had." Darian was quiet for a moment, considering. "I saw someone fighting to hold onto their dignity in a place designed to strip it away, and then I saw your eyes." He turned to face her fully. "There was so much strength in them, so much life despite everything. I couldn't look away." "And now," Abigail asked softly, "after all these years, all the changes," Darian cupped her face in his hands. At 35, Abigail had retained her fuller figure, though years of ranching life had sculpted it into something powerful and capable. Silver threads now mingled with the brown of her hair, and fine lines marked the corners of her eyes, evidence of both laughter and tears. "Now I see the woman who rebuilt herself from the inside out," he said. "The woman who gave me a family, a true home, the woman I fall in love with all over again every morning when I wake up beside her." From the yard came the sound of little Joseph's delighted squeals as Daniel swung him up onto his shoulders. Eliza clapped her hands, demanding her turn. "We should go join them," Abigail said, rising to her feet, before Daniel decides to teach Eliza how to ride the new colt. Darian laughed, standing to follow his wife. As they walked toward their children, he slipped his arm around her waist, drawing her close. "Have I told you today how much I love you, Mrs. Matthews?" he asked. Abigail smiled, the joy of her life reflected in her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Matthews. But I never tire of hearing it." As the sun dipped below the mountains, casting long shadows across the ranch, the Matthews family gathered on their porch, a testament to the power of seeing beyond appearances to the true worth within. Abigail, once sent to the mines because no one believed she had value, now stood at the center of a life filled with love, purpose, and profound happiness. And as Darian often said in the years that followed, it was the best investment he'd ever made.